As most provinces reopen businesses and services, each province has taken a different approach to giving the green light to houses of worship. While Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan have all been allowed to reopen with restrictions, churches in Ontario are still waiting for permission to open. A couple of weeks ago, we spoke to two pastors who were offended that Premier Ford was only allowing drive-in services. We're listening to you, our Context viewers, who asked us to speak about a different point of view on opening churches too soon. Here is Associate Pastor of Hamilton Church of God of Prophecy, Iris Bogle, and Senior Pastor of the Meeting House, Bruxy, Cavey. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Do you think your church could easily open its doors tomorrow if the province said, open, you're allowed to congregate once again? Would you be ready for that?
I personally am very apprehensive about opening the doors because someone has said that we should. I think that we need to move with wisdom because we don't know the extent of this pandemic, the extent to which it's still with us. And I believe that we're people that God has graced with wisdom. And so looking at what we have encountered, not only have we lost a member whom we are still grieving, we also had someone who became desperately ill from COVID-19. So whilst there are those who are saying, let's open, let's be upset with the Premier for what he says or does, as you said, the church that we're talking about most often is the building. Our church is not shut down. We're still worshiping, we're still praying, we're still fellowshipping, though at a social distance. So we're talking about a building, and we're talking about the prevalence of this disease. We don't know to what extent it has been contained. Therefore, I personally would say absolutely not.
How about you, Bruxy?
I think we would lean in the same direction, that it's not just a matter of whether or not it's legal for us to meet, but even if it were legal, is it wise? As Sister Iris was saying, is it the loving decision for us to make, especially for those in our community who are most vulnerable? And it's my understanding, my best understanding, that even when it becomes legal, that will be a limited amount of people with a promise for appropriate social protocols, which may also exclude, for instance, singing and other elements of the service. So at that point, we even have to ask the question, is it a lot of cost or a lot of risk for minimal payoff, that we're really just gathering together, not singing and not doing some of the other things that we would do in a church service, just so that we can hear maybe a sermon live, which in our case you could hear online as an alternative.
Pastor Vogel, do you take offense when the fact is that the government wouldn't consider the church an essential service? This is something that some pastors take offense to, that the church is not considered an essential service.
I don't take offense. I know who I am. The government may not have any concept as to what the church is really about. So no, I know who I am. The church knows who it is.
That's well said.
Yeah,
I would agree. I lend my amen to that, in that I don't expect a government or a secular official to understand everything about who the church is. I trust that they are doing the best with what they know. They may do it imperfectly, but I pastor my church imperfectly, and yet I don't have to wait for the government to help define who we are. We'll just make the wisest, most loving decisions we can with it, and I don't think there's any reason to take offense.
Pastor Bogle, you had talked about losing a member of your church, and I want to talk more about that because you're a pastor of a church that many would consider to be a part of a vulnerable sector of our society. Many of the members of your church are essential workers. They work in healthcare. Tell me about the challenges of being a pastor of a church that does work in such a vulnerable area.
Well, I think we have to be even more hypersensitive to the impact of this pandemic to our congregation. Others perhaps feel that they should be. Just because vulnerability is there, we have to be very mindful of that, and being called to be shepherds of the flock, whilst others may not understand the demand of what we do. I believe that pastors have to be a little more acutely aware of what the members may potentially be exposed to. People coming from work where they perhaps don't even know that they're carriers, coming into a congregation where the people don't know that they have it. Yeah. Who is going to be burying whom?
What does your church look like, Bruxy? And full discretion, I'm a member of your church. So what does your church look like right now amidst COVID-19?
Well, we use the technology that's available to us, which I think is really in line with what the first generations of Christians did. When they couldn't meet in person, they would use the technology that was available to them, in that case, writing, which is why we have half of our New Testament, because whenever the Apostle Paul couldn't get to a church in person to visit them, well, he'd write them a letter instead. He'd use the technology of his day. And so we think it's a real grace that we happen to be experiencing COVID-19 during a season where we have this kind of medium, online communication. And so we live stream our services on Sunday morning. The other aspect that makes us who we are as a meeting house is that we have what we call home churches, which are kind of home fellowships where even if you can't make it to church on Sunday morning, when we were meeting together live, we would meet together in homes and kind of do church together as a network of house churches. And we have over 100 of those that are now meeting online instead. So we have our live stream on Sunday morning, but then we're also duplicating the home church experience through a midweek online home churches that are getting together, and they discuss the sermon and they see how each other's doing. And those intimate and more interactive social units for us are really the lifeblood of how we do church.
And so as you look into the future, Bruxy, and looking at, how your church will change, what are you learning about maybe some things that the church has done in the past that as we are looking into a world of COVID and waiting for a vaccination, that maybe the church needs to let go in order to continue doing what it's doing?
That's a great question. And I wonder if this is an opportunity for the church to rethink its identity as the people and not the place. And as Sister Iris was saying, we're not the building, we're not closed, we're open for business, so to speak. And this really is just a reminder, a refresher of what we should have always known, is that the church is the people. And now the word church means the gathered people. I understand that many pastors will say, yes, but we need to gather together to be the church. But in the meantime, we're balancing the wisdom of physically gathering with finding other ways of gathering online, as we're even connecting right now. And so I think maybe it'll be an opportunity for the church to say, not all church buildings are overt and expensive. Some are very modest, but I think over a season of time, the Christian church in the West has bonded with buildings and cathedrals, and invested a lot of money and just impressive architecture, which has its own beauty, but over time, it's quite easy to start to think of that as what's impressive, as opposed to the beauty of the people who gather together. So I think there's good hope for the church to come out the other side of this in a more modest, more relational fashion.
And Sister Iris or Pastor Bogle, I know you have also seen that in your church. You said that to me that you've seen greater attendance when it comes to services. Tell us about that.
More people coming to prayer meetings, more people coming to Bible study. I would ask someone, how is this not advantageous for all of us? And just tomorrow evening, I'll be conducting a prayer meeting in England. Where do you ever see that? And it's with people from different churches. But I'll be leading that prayer tomorrow. When have we done that in the past? So I think it's very exciting. I think that God has not caused this pandemic, but he's allowing it. And if we're humble enough to learn what we can in this period, I think that we're just out for a period of explosion in the church.
Amen.
And I think that's my last question. Will you ever go back to normal after all of this is said and done? Bruxy?
I think there is a hybrid version of the church ahead for us. We don't necessarily want to go backward. We want to keep going forward. And I think when we can get together safely, wisely, lovingly, we will love being together again physically, absolutely. But I think there is also new lessons we're learning about this online reality that we're going to carry with us into the future. So there's some version of the church in the future, at least I can speak for our church, that I think will never quite look like we did in the past.
How about you, Pastor Bogle?
I believe that going forward, no, I don't believe that we can return to what we knew. Our church, Maggie, we're people who love to sing and dance and yeah, we will never. I don't believe that we can ever go back there. And I was talking with my son this morning, and he was saying to me, Mommy, a few months ago, we didn't think that we would be talking about the church that we knew then as the good old days. But already he says, being younger, the church then was the good old days. We're here to move forward, yeah.
That's a good way of ending this conversation. Bruxy, did you want to say something?
Sorry to interject, but
No,
I would
go ahead.
say even what's happening right now, I think maybe one of the good things that's happening is that I'm having a chance to meet Pastor Bogle, and there's opportunities for cross-pollinating and connecting in ways that maybe we wouldn't have done before when we were siloed in our physical locations. We could pray for the church down the street, but we might just not interact as much. And so I'm looking forward to finding avenues to just making the church healthier.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you again so much, both of you, for sharing your thoughts today with context.
Again, thank you, Maggie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, YouTube family. Thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Remember to hit the bell right there so that you can know when we post next. And let us know what you think about today's topic right there in the comments.